Welcome back to the Santa Barbara Effect. Today we are thrilled to have Kelly Barsky, the John and Jody Arnhold Director of Athletics at UCSB. Kelly first served in this role on an interim basis, and now as the full-time athletics director, is the first woman ever to serve in that capacity. Kelly, first, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I think instead of going through any more of your background, I'd rather have our listeners hear it directly from you. So prior to the interim AD role and now the full-time AD role, I know you have some history as a coach, but just tell us what brought you here and tell us how that journey has been for you.
Thanks for asking that. I'll try to be as brief as I can. And long story here. People who know me know I grew up in a pretty large family, and mom is a banker, dad was a teacher, and a high school coach. My mom was one of 7, the only female and the oldest. And I share that because I think it's important in sort of my background and recognizing as my mom being the oldest, my 6 uncles, their spouses and partners and cousins were around all the time. And I learned a lot at, breaking bread at the big table. My mom cooked like there was 30 coming every night. And my grandparents' Sunday morning coffees were, known to have 20 to 30 people. And it was a place that before I even realized it, I just learned, when to have a voice, when to be supportive, when someone's going to say something you didn't like, and how you sort of handled that. And, that sort of, that aligned with the focus on education growing up, and the focus certainly on participating in sport and being someone that was just loved to participate in anything until it became basketball of my love just to be really active, helped shaped me in a way that I think I didn't even realize until within the last 10 years.
It's funny looking back how much you learn at a family meal.
Yeah. Breaking bread. I like I said, I didn't realize it then, but now I recognize how important that time is and was. And I think it just lends itself to probably you can recognize why I love to be with teams and I love to be with student athletes and community. And, there was something I didn't have until probably, less than 10 years ago. But I was going through a program and a Pathways program and had a mentor that introduced me to Brene Brown. And Brene Brown's definition of connection. And that was the first time I felt like I really had language around more than I always knew sport and the discipline and the leadership and communication and all of those things that you learn from participating in sport. I certainly loved the education and believing that just has, changes lives. Generationally changes lives. But then being introduced to the work of Brene Brown, I recognize there's something about connection and having that connection and her definition of that, like I said, just resonated with me that it's more than just communication and relationships and discipline and hard work, but there's also something about all humans are craving connection. And finding the way to do that in the right way. And I think sport serves as that platform.
To the point of connection and athletics and the Santa Barbara community, what parts of that have you seen, have fallen in love with, have seen with athletics, education? I'm just curious. And then the overall business community in a sense as well.
Sure. Let me tell you a little bit more about my journey because I think that will lead to where we got here in how we ended up here in Santa Barbara and answer your question. So I came I was a collegiate student athlete and then planned on being a teacher, and I did teach. I taught for a couple of years, 1st and 4th grade, and just loved it. And then I had a men's basketball head coach at the University of New Hampshire, actually, Phil Rowe, who reached out to me with interest of coming back and working with his program as a graduate assistant. And I thought, wow, that would be a great experience, and I'll work on master's and then get back to teaching. And it was an aha moment for me. The opportunity to work with collegiate student athletes, the learning, the development, the growth in those years is just tremendous. And then recognizing that you also, again, that started at University of New Hampshire. So that's in Durham, New Hampshire. That's where my roots, it's where I grew up. So having this opportunity to really get to connect and bring people together and find community is where it all started for me. That led me on a path of, the women's basketball coach, Sue Johnson, there at the time, came down a couple weeks later and said, "Why are you working with them? What's wrong? Come work with us."
You started off working with the men's team.
I started off working with a Division I men's basketball program, and that led to working with both programs. So the coaches worked out a deal that I could come.
Approximately, what year was this?
So that was in early 2000s.
So if you had to guess, you were one of how many women at that time working with a men's Division I program?
Oh, it had to be limited. Now, as a graduate assistant, right? So, but it was few and far between.
Yeah.
It was pretty special. The coach that brought me was pretty special, and he welcomed me in to participate in all coaches meetings. Was incredibly inclusive in everything they did, and me being a curious person and a person of learning, just loved it. And like I said, that led me to working with the women's basketball program. At the time, I was a graduate assistant, finished my degree. At the time, Lindsay Gottlieb was on the women's basketball coaching staff, which will tie to Santa Barbara here in a minute.
I had no idea that this was a connection.
Yeah, so Lindsay was on the women's basketball coaching staff. I was a graduate assistant at the time. And then Lindsay left, a year or two later and went to Richmond at the time. Sue Johnson, who was the head coach, offered me an assistant coaching position. And that was my first job actually coaching. But, that led, then Lindsay went down to Richmond. I was coaching at the University of New Hampshire. And then she came out to Cal, if you may remember, with Joanne Boyle. I was then coaching collegiately in New York at St. Francis College in Brooklyn at the time. Another really special experience that I want to tie something together here. I was working under Brenda Milano, but we were also working closely and had strong ties to New York Liberty. We had assistant coach on that team was Sue Wicks, who was WNBA Hall of Fame, was Kim Hampton, WNBA Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And so had this opportunity to really get integrated into, again, just women serving through sport, using a sport platform to be out and engage and participate in the community, but also really succeed athletically at a high level. And so in the meantime, I'm continuing on my assistant coach journey. Lindsay Gottlieb was offered the head coaching position here at Santa Barbara. Actually, before she was offered it, she'd called me and I said, well, call me when you get the position. In particular, because I had never been, Santa Barbara was sight unseen for me. So I had heard about it, what a spectacular spot it was, but had not been out here. And so when Lindsay was hired as the head coach, the women's basketball program, after legendary Mark French on the women's side, who had just come off, Sweet 16 and playing UConn, and really a stellar career and a special career. Lindsay came in, I came out and was her first assistant. And that's how I ended up in Santa Barbara. And
what year was that?
That was in summer of 2008. And I not only can I remember that because of when we moved, but also it was my first son's first birthday is in July of 2008. And
so you and your husband and a 1-year-old son moved here, having never seen Santa Barbara.
Let me tell you about Santa Barbara. And you want to talk community and people. So my husband needed to finish up working. So we planning on moving. I moved out. I came in June for a week because we were coordinating recruiting, and then you're on the road for about a month. So officially moved in August. My 1-year-old son, Jacob, and I at the time moved out here. My husband was coming out in October, so he was going to close the house and everything in New York and Connecticut at the time. We moved out here, sight unseen, across the country, no family, 2 of us on a plane that were, stayed in an extended stay actually for about a month. And I got here, I had probably about an hour of what did I just do? I left my family, and I mentioned earlier, right, my big family, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my family, my husband's family, they're all from the East Coast. And we moved across the country with a 1-year-old. And from day one, this strong community of people that believed in relationships. And the women's basketball community at the time took me in. I had someone came up and said, if you need a pediatrician, we can help. If you need housing, let us help connect you with some individuals. If people who were helping to pick up my 1-year-old son while I was in practice and trying to figure out childcare, and just across the board.
Embraced you.
Embraced me like they embraced so many incredible people and said, let us welcome you into this community. We're happy you're here. And that led me on a trajectory, certainly that I never expected, from assistant coach to my current position. But it really starts, and still today, is about the people in this special place.
And so I don't want to skip over too many important parts there. When Lindsay left, you became the head coach?
Nope. Lindsay was leaving to go. It was 3 seasons. And Lindsay was leaving to go be the head coach at Cal up in Berkeley. And I had an opportunity to work was offered an opportunity to work in academic advising for the dean, who was another wonderful, so many incredible mentors in the College of Letters and Science over in academics. And again, I had that moment that we all have in life, right? This is, what am I doing? The next step should be continuing to coach. And, but I also, again, a couple years later, I had 2 kids now. So I had 2 kids under 4. And I thought, I've been doing this for over a decade. I have wonderful people, wonderful contacts. I'm going to take 1 year here in Santa Barbara. I actually went to lunch with two wonderful community people who sat and said, do what you think is right. My husband said, do what you think is right, will be okay. Whatever you're feeling will be okay. And so took the position in the College of Letters and Science, working in academics as an advisor. I also had partnerships with cross-campus opportunity education program and orientation. I learned so much about higher ed, about this high academic, amazing institution from a lens outside of athletics. It was a lens from the academics. I'm working with faculty and working with campus leadership. And again, that only fueled my fire in higher education even more. It fueled my fire of recognizing what athletics could do to support an entire community. And so that was a really special transition that I thought would be for a year, ended up being a couple years, and then was actually recruited back into athletics as a deputy athletic director.
Got it. Kelly, question in regards to that path, that journey. Sitting in your position right now as AD at UCSB, is your path unique in that sense of going from coaching to then the more administrative side of things? And I'm curious just because it seems like your well-roundedness of understanding all of this makes you incredible for the school.
I think what's unique, it's not necessarily unique that a coach or someone who's in higher ed and coaching at the collegiate level may transition at some point. And some don't come from coaching, but it's not unusual that a coach may transition. I think what's unique for me at the time that I changed is often coaches go into external and they're into fundraising, and they go through a path that is through either development, fundraising, external marketing, sponsorship type of trajectory. What was a little unique for me, certainly as being a female, and still there's less than 14% of Division I athletic directors are female. So that in of itself is a little bit of a unique trajectory. And then secondly, I went into an academic pathway. I switched in the university and was working in a completely different perspective outside of athletics. And then to come back in and jump into a variety of roles, it is a little unique. When I first came back into the athletic department, I didn't originally, again, just think about being an athletic director. I didn't see a lot of athletic directors that maybe had followed my trajectory or had done it the way I had done it. And then I had a really special mentor, still have a really special mentor. His name is Peter Roby. And, I remember him saying to me, just be you. Whatever role it is, athletic director or something else, like look at the roles you've taken. You've taken them because they're meaningful to you. You've taken them because they align with your values, and it's okay to just be you. And if you get into having an opportunity as an athletic director, it's going to be because you're doing it your way and you're doing it within your values and your trajectory.
So perfect opportunity now. Speaking of just be you, you're the full-time AD, and you've had a chance to think about how to put your stamp on the department. So talk to us now about the specific mission that you have for UCSB athletics and how it's going to change under your leadership.
Thank you for asking me that. I love that question. And we've actually spent, a year and a half now. I've spent a year and a half listening, learning, surveying. I brought an outside group to help us survey. One of the reasons, and let me go back a little bit of, I may have been a coach, I may have been in academics. That does not mean in 2024 that I pretend that I know what it's like to be a student athlete, even though I was a student athlete a really long time ago, or pretend I know exactly what it means to be a coach, or pretend I know exactly what it means to be in academics at this point. But what I do, I hope, is ask a lot of the right questions and use those old lenses and that perspective to say, okay, let me learn and understand more. And so in terms of mission, we spent a year and a half. I've spoken with alumni, I've spoken with current student athletes and coaches, community members, and really came to a place that one of the really special things about Santa Barbara, in addition to the spectacular location, certainly, and that we truly are a university on the ocean, is that we develop successful and resourceful people. We really do believe in leading and inspiring and innovating and persevering through challenges. And we have a drive for excellence. It doesn't come easy. You can see in the leadership we have in our coaches across the university, and look at Nobel laureates and high achieving faculty that and the student athletes and the students that come here. There's a drive for excellence, but there's also a criteria of you're going to be resourceful and persevere, and you're going to work hard, and you're going to have to be committed to developing.
So with that phenomenal backdrop, give us some examples. Who are some of the student athletes and coaches that really exude the mission here?
Yeah, let me start with, and again, I can talk about so many. And so let me start with some of maybe our coaches and our leaderships.
Yeah,
I do think that's an important place to start, across the board. And certainly we're going to get a great chance to talk with Joe Pasternak, our men's basketball coach.
Yeah, that's our special guest. He should be here any moment.
That'll be fun. And
there'll be a mood change. There'll be an energy change when Coach arrives.
Which is what I love. I love when coaches and student athletes come in and, excite the place. But certainly a special and dynamic coach there. Andrew Checketts in our men's baseball coach, and you look at him being coach of the year repeatedly for our conference, nationally recognized program. Obviously, we had this great opportunity to host a regional last year, which is unheard of here, and are really excited to be able to do that and bring community to this team that continues to be in the top 25 repeatedly. I'm almost going just adjacent in terms of their facilities, but right next to baseball, you've got Joe Evans on the softball side, who we're talking a Hall of Fame softball coach. Been in the national championship, and for her to come here and lead our student athletes and lead our women on the softball program, spectacular. Obviously, again, out in the fields there, you've got Tim Vom Steeg, who's won a national championship with men's soccer and is at the top of the conference right now. Simone Thibodeau, who is our women's tennis coach, who repeatedly, again, believes just so deeply in development of student athletes. And you've seen nationally ranked tennis players coming out of both actually our women's and men's, including Amelia Honer right now, who was in an Elite Eight and top of the country here and is an All-American and just won a professional tournament actually 2 weeks ago. So
we can get into this, but UCSB, and I think men's and women's tennis in particular, has produced professional athletes.
100%. We had Nick Moreno de Alba on last year, who's in the U.S. Open. And then circling back, my thought process almost runs around the facilities, but thinking about Renee Jimenez, who's on the women's basketball side, coached Division II for a number of years, was in the Final Four last year. I was recruiting her during her Final Four run and trying to be really respectful that she had a team to coach. And so my whole family, I'll tell this story, my whole family's sitting around the TV watching her, hoping she's winning a championship, celebrating and watching her game. And to see Division II Final Four being nationally televised is something special in women's sports as well. So
once a recruiter, always a recruiter.
Yeah, and she's
can't get it out of you.
I cannot, no, because I think that's where it starts. It starts with really great people and great leadership that have the same motivation, the same drive, believe in the mission. And so she's also from, she's local. So that's really exciting.
I just want to stop for a second. I want to talk about the role that you play. You mentioned the opportunity to be involved, and I think it's great for fans of UCSB, men's, women's, all sports, to see you there, to see you present at certain events. And it's interesting to see the role you play. Sometimes the athletic director has to be hands-on.
Yeah, my role. So I come from a servant leader mindset, 100%. Like I said, I believe that I need to, and I want to, and I love, it's passion for me to be as participatory as possible. So you'll see me at almost all of our home games. And I should be careful saying that because I'm setting up a standard that's very difficult. But you see me across all of our sports. I try to come to as much as I can at our home events. I think, to celebrate and support our student athletes, our coaches, our community is important.
Because we're always trying to regain the focus on the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've talked about the university and coaches and athletes. One of the most interesting stories that we had not anticipated that came out during the podcast was the relationship with you, the connection that led a professional football club to play now at Harder Stadium. We can debate the missteps of other organizations, but I won't ask you to comment on that. It's someone else's loss is UCSB's gain. So, yeah, tell us about that from your perspective. Professional soccer in Santa Barbara at UCSB.
Josh, first let me say I am so honored to be on the podcast with you and Rob, and to be on a podcast that hosts Peter and Debbie. They are really special people, as you know. And Rob, you started with this. They're amazing character and people here, but the story of their lives is, I told Peter and Debbie, it should be a movie or a book or something, because it's so special. So I got to, Peter and I started with a coffee at Janine's. Actually, this might be a little funny, but I don't know if you've heard this, or he shared, it started off with us connecting on the phone. I said, let's get together for coffee and just talk about it. Tell me what you're trying to do. For me to buy in and get excited about something, it always, again, starts with the people, the community. What are the values? What are they trying to do? Let's start off with a coffee. And so we're supposed to meet at Janine's. And you can maybe appreciate this. He goes to one Janine's, I go to a different Janine's. And so it was, a little tricky figuring out our way to get together. But once we did, we just hit it off right away, because I so, appreciate his story. I relate to his story and to what he's trying to do and what they're trying to build with Santa Barbara Sky. So almost immediately I had said, tell me more, and tell me, what it is, why you're doing this, and asked a lot of questions, but became pretty clear pretty quick that Santa Barbara Sky could be something, again, that enhances the community. And to be able to host something like that at Harder Stadium here at UC Santa Barbara, to me, just again, it brings together community, it brings together high-performing athletics, and allows right here in our town to bring people together. And so really, really excited for that partnership. It took us about 18 months to solidify a contract and get that going. But now we're excited to be here and to host them.
This is my first hard question, so you can answer it or not, but I'm curious.
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah,
Josh.
You'll be. You mentioned the changing landscape, right? If you followed sports, especially on the West Coast, you know that the Pac-12 isn't the Pac-12. You know that bizarrely colleges are leaving to go to some other conference, right? We have here a number of highly competitive teams. We have revenue questions. Have you considered leaving the Big West? Have you considered, and is that an all or nothing proposition? Could certain sports do it or not? What is that discussion like in your department?
That is a great question. You're right. That is your the hardest question so far. No, the reality is, again, everyone has to be evaluating the landscape of the NCAA. It has changed so much and so quickly in the last 4 years. I think we were all hit in 2020 with thinking that COVID would be the biggest change, or is this significant change that we're sort of working through? And the reality is it's just continued over the last 5 years. In terms of conference alignment, again, I think it goes back to assessing and recognizing your mission, your values, your strengths, your challenges, and figuring out what's the right fit. Right now, we are so thrilled to be part of the Big West. We're in a conference that meets a regional footprint that we love. We're in a conference with several other UC institutions, which provides unusual stability in a time of complete change. But that's not to say that you don't have to be, as a leader, and certainly in an athletic department and on an institution, forward thinking and open-minded to what's ahead of you, what you're looking at. Currently, we've been able to, like you said, we compete nationally in several of our programs. We are highly ranked within the conference in almost all of our programs. And so we'll continue to evaluate what makes sense. Right now, with the changes that have been made, we're actually really pleased to be a West Coast regional footprint. I actually think that's a position of strength right now, a position of strength for our programs, for recruiting, for our alums and friends and gauchos all over to be able to see us and participate in games. And so really it will be a matter of us making, the right decisions over the next several years to be able to ensure that we continue to be highly, highly competitive.
I'm curious because that all leads back to the idea of your background as well and this community, which I find being incredibly adaptable. What do you attest that to?
Well, I think you have to be adaptable when when your passion is to connect and serve people. When you have an education background, that again, my learning was about listen, learn, understand people have different personality types. They have different backgrounds. They're waking up in the morning and coming to work or coming to school, and you don't know what's happened in that morning. You don't know what they've gone through. And so approaching everything with a focus in mind, again, on connection and about caring for people. That doesn't mean I'm not highly competitive. And I don't believe that, that there's work and you have to work through a process to have excellent outcomes, but you also can approach, you started the episode talking about kindness. You can approach people with kindness and intention and thoughtfulness. And again, I think those that believe in that mission are going to be drawn to continue to help support and serve that mission.
Before we say goodbye, Kelly, are there any specific UCSB alumni athletes that you'd like to highlight?
There are so many Gaucho greats and alums in and out of sport that I would love to highlight and mention, but we just have this rich history and continue that history and legacy of development and achievement and success. AJ Mitchell was picked in the second round of the NBA draft last summer and is playing with the Oklahoma Thunder. Manu Doa was selected first in the Major League Soccer draft this year, is currently playing with San Diego FC. Gabe Vincent, currently playing with the Lakers. Shane Bieber, Cy Young Award winner. Damon Jones, who's in the front office of the World Series winning Dodgers. Corey Close, who's the women's basketball head coach at UCLA and had her team first in the country this year. Brian Shaw was coach of the LA Clippers, and Chris Del Conte, who's the AD at Texas. Again, I could really go on because this focus on people, on development, on service, and you just see this rich tradition here at UC Santa Barbara. And again, it continues because of the great people we have as part of our programs.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of our UCSB episode with Kelly Barsky. Stay tuned for part 2 featuring men's head basketball coach Joe Pasternak. This is Josh Narva. Along with my co-host Rob Gross, we'd like to thank all of the people who helped make this podcast a reality. This episode was edited and produced by Rachel DePass. We'd like to thank Sophia Gaines for her creative input and Conrad Kono for his original music. Check him out on Spotify or Apple Music. And speaking of music, this episode was recorded at the corporate offices of Sonos in Santa Barbara. Their mission is to fill homes with music and create immersive listening experiences. Learn more at sonos.com. Thank you for listening. For more information on the podcast overall and the next episode, follow us on social media.